We will be discussing critical real estate tax propositions. Everyone on this call is likely to be impacted by the propositions we'll outline today. For example, my firm, Winefield and Associates, buys environmentally distressed commercial properties in California. Will we want to buy in California with the results of the possible increased real estate taxes that Prop 15 would prompt? Jeff Prang's lecture and the results of the November 3 votes will help my firm and you decide how viable real estate investing in our state will continue to be. I'm about to give Mr. Prang's background, but I would like to mention that unfortunately he has to leave early due to a family emergency. He's going to be taking a flight as soon as he's done with his primary presentation. George Renke and Carol Kwan will be answering some of the questions that are very involved in the propositions will be discussed. So a bit about Mr. Prang. Los Angeles County Assessor Jeff Prang is in his second term, having been first elected in 2014 and then again by a wide margin in 2018. Mr. Prang is a product of the Midwest, born in Detroit, raised in Warren, Michigan. Mr. Prang graduated from Michigan State University before relocating to California, where he served for nearly 18 years as a West Hollywood City Council member, as well as 4 terms as that city's mayor, among many other positions in the public sector. Upon taking office in 2014 as the Los Angeles County Assessor, Mr. Prang implemented sweeping reforms to ensure that the strictest ethical guidelines rooted in fairness, accuracy, and integrity would be adhered to in his office. The Los Angeles County Assessor's Office is the largest office of its kind in the nation, with 1,400 employees, and provides the foundation for a property tax system that generates $17 billion annually. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Los Angeles County Assessor, Jeff Prang.
Thank you very much, Matthew. It's a pleasure to be with you. I appreciate your invitation and setting up this meeting. The work of the Bruin's Professional Real Estate Affinity Group is involved in the same sort of work that the LA County Assessor's Office is. So I'm happy to have this opportunity to share with you a little bit about my office and what is going on in the real estate market these days. I did want to acknowledge a former colleague of mine from the city of Los Angeles. We were both council staffers, Evelyn Alexander Jerome, who's on the call. It's nice to see her pop up on my screen. So I'm not going to assume that, aside from what Matthew just said, I'm not going to assume that everyone here knows who I am. So, well, I'll introduce myself and a little bit about the office. Now, if you're not sure exactly what the assessor's office does, don't worry. Some of my new staffers told me that they had to Google it before they took the job. You know, local government can be quite opaque. There's a lot of machinations that just are not within the public light. And sometimes trying to get things done can be very frustrating if you don't know how it's all put together. And perhaps nowhere is this worse than dealing with property tax administration, where a series of complex laws and a multi-agency system oftentimes put taxpayers at a loss as to how to resolve an issue or even who to call. My intent today is to illuminate that system for you while I provide an overview of my role, discuss the 2020 assessment role and some of the challenges that COVID-19 has brought to our operations and to the market. And feel free to text questions into the chat box as I go along, and Carol Kwan will hopefully help me answer those. And when I'm done, I'll stay around as long as I can. But George Renke, who's been with the office for more than 30 years, he's the chief deputy assessor, can probably give you some pretty substantive answers to things if I'm not able to stick around to answer them myself. So as real estate professionals, many of you may already know about the particulars of my office, but for those who don't know, let me share with you a bit of a snapshot. As Matthew said, I administer a department of nearly 1,400 employees in 6 locations throughout the county. About half of those employees are appraisers. Our budget is nearly $200 million, and we're the largest local assessment agency in the United States. As the assessor, I'm one of 3 county-wide elected officials. The others are much better known than me, and that's the sheriff, who seems to be getting a little bit of attention these days, as well as the district attorney, who's in a tough fight to keep the job. But the assessor, in many ways, is the fiscal engine of local government. We determine the value of all taxable property in the county. These values are then used to calculate property taxes, which in turn provide revenue for local government, particularly county, municipal, and public schools. As you can see on the chart on your screen, the assessor has a symbiotic relationship with a number of other departments that each own a piece of the property tax administrative system, primarily the auditor controller as well as the tax collector. When my office receives a copy of a deed from the registrar recorder or a building permit from the various cities in the county, we then complete a valuation assessment. The auditor controller is the one who tells you how much you owe, and the tax collector, treasurer tax collector, mails the bills and collects the payments. I am often misidentified as the tax assessor. Just so you know, there's no such thing as a tax assessor in California. We have tax collectors and assessors. They're two different jobs, two different people. This year, property taxes that begin with my office's valuation will provide $17 billion plus for vital public services, which are needed now more than ever because sales taxes attributed to retail, tourism, restaurants, et cetera, have declined rather precipitously due to COVID-19. That means property taxes are a more important foundation to local government's ability to maintain those services. So what types of property are taxable? Well, the most obvious is real property, which includes land and improvements, but also what we call business personal property, which includes furniture, equipment, and machinery. That also includes airplanes, commercial aircraft, as well as general aviation aircraft, mobile homes, boats, and even racehorses. By profession, I'm often asked if we have a finance background. We are not a finance office. Functionally, we are real estate appraisers. I guess I have a little bit of finance background, but we're not a fiscal office per se. Fair, accurate values are key to both reliable revenue for the county as well as equity among taxpayers. The valuation of property is, of course, important, but there's a number. The appraisal function and methodology of my office is not always what's most important to many property owners and those in the real estate industry. But one component that does matter a lot to members of the public, however, is what happens in what we call our ownership division. That's the unit of my office that analyzes deeds and building permits and other records to determine whether a property is required to be reassessed and therefore taxed differently. In California, under Prop 13, property is assessed only when there is a change in ownership or new construction. Your property doesn't get reassessed randomly unless one of those two events occurs. Generally, a transfer of property is a change in ownership. However, the law does provide some exceptions to that, such as interspousal transfers, which are not reassessable. There are a number of common mistakes that consume a lot of time of the ownership division, and one of the most common ones involves trusts and other legal entities, such as LLCs. Moving property into or out of a trust is legally a transfer. Now, if you're transferring property from your name into a trust that is in your name, generally that's not a change in ownership. However, trusts are complicated legal devices and often result in inadvertent mistakes that will lead to a reassessment and a supplemental tax bill. For instance, if the trust is between you and an entity controlled by you, we need to be able to verify that fact, which typically can be done by providing us with a copy of the entire trust. Any deviation, no matter how seemingly inadvertent or small as it may appear, can lead to a reassessment. It's also important to remember that if the assessor asks for information from you or some documentation, it's critical that you provide it, because failure to provide it doesn't mean that you're going to somehow or other escape a reassessment or escape valuation. We are legally obligated to put a value on property on an annual basis. And if you don't give us the information, we'll guess. And we don't guess on the low side. So it's best to make sure that you don't ignore correspondence and communications from the assessor's office. If you need more information on trust, there's a quick guide on trust on my website, which is assessor.lacounty.gov, which answers a lot of the common questions and situations that people find themselves in. Obviously, we can send one to you through Matthew if you'd like as well. Another common problem and valuable ownership exclusion or tax savings program is what's known as the parent-to-child transfer, also called Proposition 58. This allows children who inherit property from their parents to keep their parents' tax base. So if you don't apply, your tax could end up being adjusted to market value and might just very well tax you out of the home that you just inherited from your parents. Similarly, this benefit exists in some cases for grandchildren inheriting property from their grandparents when the parents are deceased. It's also known as Proposition 193. All of these things are legally available, but if you don't tell us, and the way you tell us is by filling out an application, you will be reassessed. It's important to remember that a Proposition 58 needs to be applied for even if the property is in a trust. A trust does not eliminate your requirement to fill out the necessary documentation, including the death of real property owner form with our office. There's proposed ballot measures that will amend Prop 13 and Proposition 58, both of which I'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment. We also administer a number of programs that allow property owners to save money on their property taxes. One such program is the easiest of them all. It's called the homeowner's exemption. It's available to anybody who owns their home and lives in it as their primary residence. And I usually like to recommend to realtors in particular to advise homeowners when their clients are going into a closing to fill out that form as part of their closing documents. It gives them a modest tax cut at a time when they're arguably making their biggest investment and putting out a lot of money. The homeowner's exemption allows me to reduce the taxable value of a home by $7,000, which translates into a rather modest $70 savings every year, but it adds up over time. We estimate that each year there's about $30 million in savings that go unclaimed in LA County. For example, our records show that in the city of Palmdale, almost 50% of homeowners who qualify for the homeowner's exemption don't apply for it. That number in the city of LA is 34%. So if you're a realtor and you want to have information you want to give to clients and prospective clients, it makes it appear as though you're looking out for them and helping save money, let them know about the homeowner's exemption. There are other savings programs available through my office for people living with disabilities, veterans, and those who are affected by natural disasters. If fire, flood, or earthquake may entitle you to temporary property tax relief due to that damage. And I made it one of my primary goals as assessor to make sure people are educated and informed about these programs. And again, all this information is on my website under a button on the left-hand side that says, lower my taxes. So one of the most important things we do is producing the annual assessment roll. The assessment roll is essentially it's the inventory of all property in LA, all taxable property in LA County. It is a critical document because it is the foundation for revenues that are used to provide funding for public schools, for city services such as police and roads, and as well as county services. And I'm required to complete the assessment roll annually by June 30th. We operate on a fiscal year. Property values are established on an annual basis on January 1st, also known as the lien date. And that gives us about 6 months annually to prepare this extensive document. It's an important planning document for local government as they prepare their budget, but it also serves as an important economic indicator, providing some insight as to the health and direction of the real estate market. This year was particularly challenging in preparing the roll because of COVID-19. It changed the way that we normally conduct business. We had to transfer all of our people from offices to working from home, and there was a bit of an adjustment. But I can report that the 2020 assessment roll came in at $1.77 trillion. That's the total assessed value of LA County. Obviously, the market value was considerably higher. Property values in LA County grew at 5.97% for the fiscal year ending June 30th, just slightly less than last year's 6.25%. To not get too deep into the details of the 2020 assessment roll, I do want to let you know that transfers of real estate were the largest contributors to the roll value, coming in at about close to $50 billion, which was a 3% increase over last year. New construction added $12 billion to the roll, or just under 1% increase. And finally, the value of about 14,000 properties that had been reassessed for a decline in value, meaning they were worth less than at the time that they were purchased, were fully restored to their Prop 13 base year, which added about $1.5 billion, or just under 1% to the assessment roll. The annual CPI adjustment, which Prop 13 allows for, is kept at 2%, also contributed to roll growth. I want to emphasize, however, this number does not reflect the current impact on the market of COVID-19. We are anticipating significant impacts, particularly on commercial and industrial properties, as well as a dramatic increase in the assessment appeals, as well as decline in value applications, which may reflect a negative market impact of COVID. The problem is a lot of these appeals and decline in value applications are coming in now. Keep in mind that the property value was established on January 1st, so it's not averaged throughout the course of the year. It's done on a specific day. So if your property lost value in March and April, that won't be reflected in its value until the January 1st of 2021. But there is a strong indication that next year's lien date will tell a story of how COVID has impacted the market. However, up until now, 2020 represents the 10th consecutive year of property value growth in the county since the recession of 2008 to 2010. For your reference, I include a sample of growth percentages in the Westwood region for this year. Both Beverly Hills and Los Angeles saw over 6.5% increase in their valuation. Culver City grew at 10%, Santa Monica 7%, West Hollywood 6.3%. West Side cities usually have a higher value growth compared to other cities in the county. If you're interested in another area or city in particular, we can send over that data. Our annual report is also going to be coming out at the end of this month in a digital version, and you can see a lot of get down to the weeds in terms of a lot of specific data about individual cities in LA County. Median sales prices for a single-family home in the county has increased steadily over the course of the pandemic, primarily because there's still some strength in the market due to low interest rates. Plus, because a lot of people took their homes off the market, inventory is scarce, which seems to make those that are available a little bit more competitive. The median sales price currently is about $700,000 compared to $638,000 back in March when the pandemic accelerated. I also included a table here with median sales price for Westwood area homes. Everything, as you can see, except for the city of LA, is over $1 million. Earlier, I mentioned about a potential increase in what we call decline in value applications, otherwise known as Proposition 8. A decline in value allows you to formally disagree with the value that we assign as of January 1st. A decline in value essentially is an assertion that your property is worth less than what we call the trended Prop 13 base year, which is essentially the price you paid for the property plus the annual 2% increase. By law, I am required to enroll the lesser of the adjusted base year or the current market value, whichever is lower. But again, because property values were established on January 1st, if you're being impacted now, that's not going to be reflected till next year. But because these questions have come up quite a bit, I expect a lot of confusion when property tax bills go out next month. But we've been doing the best we can do to inform our constituents that if they think that their property warrants another review due to a decrease in value, that you have the opportunity to file an application through November 30th. And keep in mind that a reduction in value is only temporary until the market recovers and your property value is restored to its original base year. At the same time, we are navigating the COVID crisis. We're also preparing what could be a fairly tectonic shift in the property tax system. As you know, there's a couple measures on the ballot in November that will have a big impact on my office, which will be the primary agency responsible for administering these if they're adopted. Proposition 15, also known as the split roll, would change the assessment of commercial property from the current event-based model introduced under Prop 13 to an annual or cyclical model. The implementation of this will require a significant increase in my workforce. As I mentioned before, I've got about 1,400 employees, about 550 of them are appraisers, of which only about 100 are advanced commercial industrial appraisers. To implement Prop 15, we estimate that I'll need an additional 500 commercial industrial appraisers, or a five-fold increase to my current numbers, as well as about another 200 support staff. This poses a major challenge to both recruitment and training. Currently, in the best of circumstances, I'm usually fortunate if I can hire and train a maximum of 60 appraisers a year, which barely keeps up with attrition. We simply don't have the internal capacity to recruit, hire, and train 500 appraisers within the 2-year implementation guidelines of the measure. The compounding challenge is that typically a commercial industrial appraiser needs a minimum of 5 years of training experience before they're ready to take on the type of complex work required by the split roll initiative. In anticipation of Prop 15 passing, we've been looking at a new model for recruitment and training. We are working with the LA Community College District and the Rio Hondo Community College District to see if there's a way that we can move a good amount of the training out of the government and into the community college system, where they have the ability and capacity to train more prospective appraisers. The other measure is Prop 19, which would allow homeowners who are 55 or older, the disabled, or victims of natural disaster to transfer their property tax with them when they sell their home and purchase a new one. The amendment would also prevent people who inherit family properties from keeping the low tax base unless they use the home as their primary residence. And of course, the market value has to be less than $1 million. Both Prop 15 and 19 will be significant operational challenges. We anticipate for Prop 15 in particular, it will probably take 5 to 10 years to fully get up to implement that measure. However, if we get enough money and resources and time, I'm certain that we'll be able to administer it, but nobody should have any false illusions that we're going to turn a switch and have these things up and operating in a short amount of time. Just a couple of last things I want to say before I close. There's a few questions that come up a lot from members of the public that when I speak, and I want to reference them because they may be your questions. One is, what do we do in the event of the death of a property owner? So to avoid getting reassessed, it is crucial that you notify the assessor's office within 150 days by filing a change in ownership, death of real property owner form with my office. Failure to do so will complicate inheritance and estate planning, particularly if you want to take advantage of parent-to-child transfers. A lot of time when people are inheriting property, they get reassessed. They don't know that they've got to file this death of real property owner form and the Proposition 58. We can usually untangle those, but you're going to have to pay money up front and sometimes take months, literally months, for those to get reconciled. People ask me all the time why they get reassessed. Well, you don't get reassessed. You only get reassessed on new construction or transfer. Sometimes the property tax bill will be much higher than the year before, but that's not because you got reassessed. That's because one of the special assessments, which have nothing to do with the assessor's office, it may deal with transportation or schools that are billed on your property tax bill, usually are the reasons why there's an increase in your property taxes. But the general rule of thumb for when your property does get reassessed is, are you adding square footage, such as new construction, such as a pool, or adding an alternative dwelling unit or second floor? But if you're just remodeling an existing kitchen or bathroom or replacing a roof, in most cases, those are not reassessed. And then another issue, we get a lot of questions about what to do if there is a disparity between the records that you see on your property at the city and those in the assessor's records. Whose do you believe? You'll always believe the cities. The cities are the ones who determine what is legally allowable on property. My office will reflect what we see and what we know is there, but we don't opine whether it's allowed to be there or not. So if you illegally convert your garage into living space and we know it's been converted, we'll reassess it. But that doesn't mean it's legal, and the city could come and tell you to take it out, and you can't hide behind the the assessor says it's there. Our records are not a legal record in that regard. And finally, if you are a real estate professional, I urge you to go to my website and bookmark a tab that we put there, especially for you. It's called Real Estate Professionals. We put a lot of information in there for realtors and others that we hope will help you in your own professional development or provide information that you might want to share with your clients and prospective clients. We also do a regular newsletter exclusively for real estate professionals, and you can sign up for that. And we won't spam you with fluff information. We'll send out things that we think that you may not know that might be useful in your profession. So that's pretty much a look inside my office. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen, and hope you can agree that we in the assessor's office have a lot to offer you as real estate professionals. And I, again, particularly want to thank Matthew for setting up this meeting, and hope that you'll invite me back. We're always here to be of assistance. But
we certainly will. And we certainly thank you. In fact, I believe we've already invited you back for a second meeting in early October. And I know the folks that couldn't make it today are very excited to hear you speak then. Before I forget, I also want to thank Michelle Chambers, who helped set this all up. It's been wonderful throughout the past 2 weeks that we've been scheduling you and working out the logistics. And do you have time for questions, or do you have to get on a plane?
I can take a couple of them.
Well, I know one question came up earlier as to how the assessor's office assesses ADUs. And that's a hot topic of conversation.
It's there's nothing interesting or different the way we do. We do it the same way we would do a new pool or second story. It's just new construction. We usually will apply the cost methodology of appraisal to that. We will assess the added square footage in use. We will not reassess the entire property, just the new square footage. We will use Marshall & Swift's standard for construction for establishing that cost. So it's really not any change in the way we our normal business operations.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to ask a strange question. Does the assessor keep tabs on how these propositions are going? Because you're going to have to hire a bunch of folks maybe. And so if you were a Vegas betting man, how are these props doing, 15 and 19?
So two things. Well, as the administrator in a position where I am expected to be fair, accurate, and impartial, I have focused my efforts to provide unbiased information about how this will impact our office and what the challenges will be in administering it. Politically, it seems to be, the last poll I saw is it seems to be leading slightly in at least a poll reported by the Sacramento Bee this week. I think it was at 53%. In the world of politics, that's not considered a particularly strong position to be at this stage of the campaign. As you can see from watching television, they're already spending enormous amounts of money on both sides. Hard to tell what's going to happen at this point, but I'm not waiting to see what the answer is. We're trying to make sure that we're ready to hit the ground running should it pass. Plus, there are some advantages that we could take advantage of whether or not the measure passes.
Thank you. Now we've got some questions coming in no particular order, and please tell me when you have to leave. And by the way, I hope whatever's going on, it works out for you. I wish you the best, sir.
I did see that there's one that somebody asked me if you need to file a death of a property owner if the property's in a trust. Yes, a trust does not eliminate your obligation to fill out forms with our office. You still need to do inheritance forms such as Prop 58 or Prop 193, death of real property. You have to do all those things. Trusts, where they fail to respond with those documents, are one of our biggest public service issues.
Very interesting. Kareem Jowdy asks, does the city of Inglewood have its own assessing system in addition to that of LA County?
No, we do the assessment for property in the city of Inglewood. Inglewood grew at a rate of over 20%, I think, this last year. I think they're doing a stadium or something there.
Some $5 billion or so investment, right. Yes. That had its first game without players, I believe.
Indeed.
I mean, without audience, oh boy. I have not seen any other questions come in here. Does anybody have questions they want to ask the assessor or his staff? Well, I have a general question. It's very self-serving, but I have never researched information on your website. It seems like there's an incredible amount. Well, I do it very rarely. Incredible amount of information that's available. What are the most common topics of research on your website
So,
most common tool?
So a lot of people go there just to get information about their property. You can now go to our website, you can type in your address, and you can get virtually all the public information that we have available on our website. We incorporate some tax collector information, so you can see what the current property tax allocation is to that property. You can see the photos, maps, building dimensions. The only thing we don't put online is ownership. We also put in historic assessment data going back a few decades. This is information that we used to sell that I decided that since it was public data, it would be better to make it available for the public. It actually helped reduce some of our public service inquiries by doing so. But a lot of our data actually is foundational to a lot of other services that you probably already use. Maybe it would be Case Shiller or CoreLogic or Redfin and Zillow. So we're doing the best that we can do to take that information that a lot of those companies use and add value to it to make that available as well. So there's also recent sales. You can get that also from Zillow or Redfin, but you also get it directly from the source on our website.
Thank you. I'm having questions come in. I know you're looking as well, but just to sort them by topic regarding property values. One person is asking, what impact do you think Proposition 15 will have on property values if it passes? And another person is asking, what impact do you think COVID-19 will have on property values?
So COVID-19 seems to have had a positive benefit on residential property, although it's very difficult to tell because the number of transactions is significantly off from a year-over-year basis. But those that are selling, obviously the median price of a single-family home increased from $638,000 to $700,000 since March of this year. Commercial industrial properties will be a very different story. A lot of properties have moved. A lot of office buildings, their employees are teleworking, so they're empty. A lot of them may determine that the teleworking is working well for them, and they may decide to downsize. A lot of storefronts, a lot of retail businesses may not be coming back. There could be an impact on property values as well as rents. And if Prop 15 passes, it'll be even more impactful. One of the things about our office is we're not really great at forecasting. We really observe what transactions have already occurred. So as more and more transactions happen over the next couple of months, as we get into next year's roll preparation, we'll begin to make some projections about where we think the market's going to head. But I think I could say pretty confidently that there will definitely be some sort of negative impact on commercial industrial properties. And I think this is a point where I probably need to depart, but I do have George Renke, who's the Chief Deputy Assessor, and as I mentioned, a graduate of your program, and Carol Kwan, who can continue answering questions. And again, I apologize for having to run, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you. Wish you the best, and it's been a pleasure. It's been quite insightful.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Ms. Kwan and Mr. Renke, you want to tell the group a bit about yourself? Because there's more questions coming in. We'd love to hear your background and learn what you have to share. Carol, would you like to start?
Hi. Yeah. Hi, I'm Carol Kwan. I'm Special Assistant to Assessor Prang. I am a graduate of UCLA, class of 85, poli-sci major. And I've been with the assessor's office for over 34 years now. And I've been a special assistant for almost 19 of those 34 years. So I'm very pleased to be able to be here to answer any questions you may have.
Do you have any additional thoughts on how Prop 15, if it passes, might impact property values? I've gotten that question about 5 times via email and some more on the side. So it's definitely on top of everybody's mind. Have you seen any studies that you might be able to reference about it?
I haven't really seen any studies. I might need to pass this along to my Chief Deputy, George Renke, if he has any insights on that.
Yeah, so there are no studies at this point. There's a lot of speculation as to what property types will be, impacted to the greatest extent. obviously those being retail, hospitality, and the like. So, we're continually tracking, as Assessor Prang had mentioned, with the lower interest rates and the supply and demand, we have seen an increase in single-family housing. That market has been strong, but we are anticipating, due to COVID, some softening in some of the commercial industrial areas.
Thank you. Unrelated, folks have asked why the assessor's office is one of the three that go through election. Why is the assessor's office one of the three elected offices? Just curious.
That's California Constitution requires that those three offices be elected positions.
Wonderful. Are there any other aspects of Prop 15 or Prop 19 you may want to share? Some of the specifics? It's a very sophisticated audience here.
So we're mainly focused on what it's going to take to administer Prop 15. So we have estimated that it's going to require a significant increase in the number of appraisers that we have, and also it will require quite a bit of training to bring that number of appraisers up to the level to appraise commercial industrial properties. It's not somebody that's just met minimum certification that we can assign to value Staples or Dodger Stadium or some of the other major commercial industrial properties that will have to be assessed. So it will be a significant undertaking for our office. We have spent quite a bit of time looking at the measure and what it's going to take. And typically it takes this office about a minimum of 5 years to get an appraiser trained up to the level where they can handle commercial industrial properties, and that includes a significant amount of training, not only the training that we provide through the office, but advanced training. Some of the training that's provided, for instance, at UCLA Extension. I went through that program and graduated with a certificate with an emphasis in appraisal. There are other courses that are given by the Appraisal Institute, courses from the State Board of Equalization, many advanced courses that are required before somebody, and experience before an appraiser is prepared to do large commercial industrial. So that's one of the concerns, and one of the things we've been looking at is training. We've been working with the Board of Equalization, not only to provide the basic level of training, but also looking at some of the more advanced training that will be needed in order to get assessor offices up to speed to do this type of work.
Thank you for that. I have two related questions. One is, I haven't read the proposition, I have to admit, on 15. How long is the ramp-up period? And along with that, because the ramp-up period is probably going to be less time than you need, will you be hiring outside fee appraisers for implementation of Prop 15, should it pass?
We will be looking at the possibility of hiring outside fee appraisers. There's going to be a lot of work outside this office also. So we actually are anticipating losing quite a few of our experienced appraisers. And typically that's by, tax advocates. And, we're anticipating that there will be a lot of business out there for property tax advocates, tax agents that are looking to appeal the values that we establish and get those lowered. So there will be a lot more work in that industry. So there's going to be a lot of competition for appraisers if Prop 15 goes through.
So you're saying that the appraiser business should be good after if it passes?
Yes, beyond good, significantly impacted.
Very interesting. I know we have several appraisers on the Zoom meeting, and they're all eager to hear from your team. Well, it's nice to have a couple Bruins answering questions. Thank you so much for being here. Does anybody have any other questions? I'm seeing, let's make sure I didn't forget any. I've been multitasking here. George, how long have you been at the assessor's office?
31 years now, so since
goodness.
'89.
My goodness. Oh, I see El Cid Ramos put some information on the website. Do George or Carol want to talk about tools that folks typically use on the website for their research, feel free.
Yeah, as Assessor Prang mentioned, most of the information that people seek there is information about their own home, square footage, year built, land size, et cetera. And actually the website is quite helpful for that type of information. If El Cid is on the line, or Carol might be more familiar with the professionals area of the website and what is specifically in that area.
Well, I have an unrelated question that's come through. Maybe it's been answered. I don't think it has. Does the eviction of no, it has not. Does the eviction of a rent-controlled tenant or the major renovation of a property impact the assessed value of a property if it significantly raises its value? Well, there we go.
Eviction of a tenant would not have an impact on the value. In general terms, we will consider rent restrictions when valuing a property via the income approach. So depending on the level of restriction or how close those rents are to market, that may have an impact on the ultimate value of an apartment building, for instance. What was the second question?
I think you answered them both. Well,
okay.
Major renovation.
So when a property is renovated, so as Assessor Prang mentioned, we only revalue property if it transfers or if there's new construction. And in new construction, that's typically added square footage. So the easiest way to describe that is if you're simply replacing items, like a roof with a new roof or an existing air conditioning system with a new one, those sorts of things we don't pick up. If a building transfers in a renovated state, we will look at the condition of the property as of the transfer and value it accordingly. But it will not trigger a reassessment if a property is renovated, assuming that it's only replacing items and not adding square footage.
Another question, sir, and Carol. Does the assessor's office have any thoughts on adjusting down the tax value of houses that lose value because of regulation? I don't know what specific regulation is referenced, but can regulations impact housing values, and as such will the tax basis decrease? So there was Proposition 8, or what's called decline in value. It's Proposition 8 from a long time ago in the 70s. That allows us to adjust a value if the current market value as of January 1st, which is the property tax lien date, is lower than the trended base value. So if there is a regulation that goes in place that has a significant impact on the property's value and its base value is fairly current, then there may be the possibility that we would evaluate the value as of January 1st. And if that value is lower than the trended base value, then we would enroll the lower of the two values. Thank you for that. And the questions keep pouring in. Randy Scheinbein, who's one of the founders of Bruin Professionals, asked, if Prop 15 passes, what will be the basis for the tax amount be? What will the basis for tax amount be on a sale of a commercial property?
So our interpretation of the measure at this point is that we would continue to establish a base value as of the transfer, but we would also be required to review for a commercial industrial property that qualifies. We would have to review the value at least once every 3 years.
Wonderful. I've been asked what happens if an unpermitted addition was done, say, 50 years ago. The home has been sold several times over the years, but now the homeowner wants to get addition up to code. Do you need me to repeat that?
So we would look at whether or not, so in other words, if years ago there was an addition not permitted, but the property sold, then in all likelihood, we would have been aware of the addition, and the value of that addition would have been included in the sales price. And assuming that we enrolled the sales price of the property, we would have already reflected in the value that we enrolled the value of the addition. So if someone went to get it permitted currently, we would become aware of the permit. We would review it and possibly look to see whether or not we had picked up the value of that addition the last time that we assessed the property, and that it's already included in our assessment.
Wonderful. We're starting to get in the weeds here. I love it. Another question from Randy. Will new sales be based on 1% of the sale price plus local assessments?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. Will new sales be based on 1% of the sale price plus local assessments? I don't quite understand the question. I'm just reading it as is.
Yes. So we will, anytime a property transfers, we estimate the market value as of that transfer. And generally speaking, that tends to be what the property sold for, the sales price. And Prop 13 still restricts the general tax levy to 1%. Plus any additional voted indebtedness or bond measures, et cetera. So that is remaining the same.
Wonderful. I want to thank you, George and Carol, so much for coming in last minute and answering these very detailed questions. We are going to segue into our networking portion of our get-together today. And if you two want to stick around and meet in networking groups of 6, we'd be delighted to have you. And so we call these breakout groups. And when the breakout groups are triggered in a couple minutes, there'll be 6 of you. Some folks may drop off, but I think most folks are going to stay on. I'll ask that one person sort of take the lead and just call on folks so they can give 30-second elevator pitches, descriptions of what you do, some possible topics of discussion. How you would be what we discussed today, how you think these propositions will impact real estate values, how you're surviving and hopefully thriving during COVID. And this officially ends at 1 p.m., but go as long as you'd like or cut it short if you feel that's appropriate for your schedule. And I think Leah is going to trigger it now. Leah, let me know via message if that's a problem. But I just thought in the back of our minds, we're all thinking a little COVID. So I'm going to leave us with a little Winston Churchill. If you're going through hell, keep going, everyone. And be well. It was a pleasure getting together with you today. Can't wait to get together again in person.